Come on in, honey. The lantern's lit, the veil's a little thin, and the wind's been dying to carry a few secrets your way. Welcome to Raven's Ramblings, where the shadows walk beside us and the past never stays buried, and a good spell can speak louder than a sermon. I'm Raven Nightingale, part healer, part hellraiser, keeper of the old ways and ghost stories alike. So pull up a chair and listen close. You never know what might be whispering in the dark. Welcome back to Raven's Ramblings, everyone. I am your host, Raven. And tonight I want to talk about something that's a little bit more personal to me. All right. Last week, was it last week? I think it was last week. I heard another witchy podcast because, yes, I do listen to other podcasts. I do not listen to my own podcast because, well, I'm the one talking and I really don't like the sound of my own voice. But I do listen to a lot of other witchy podcasts. And this particular one was talking about reclaiming your power through witchcraft. Okay. And I don't mean just your magical power, like reclaiming your power through witchcraft. And the more I listen to it, and I really I really get thinking about my own story because truly I don't think that I became a witch because I wanted power. I think I became a witch because I was tired of disappearing. Yeah. And I know that probably sounds super dramatic, but if I'm being real with all of you, and I try really hard to always be real with all of you, because what is the point of being fake on something like this, right? And if I'm being real about it, I think a lot of us kind of understand that feeling of disappearing more than we are really comfortable admitting, right? Surely it's not just me. And maybe it is. Maybe I'm the crazy one. That is also very possible. But uh where was I? Oh, yes. So sometimes people kind of imagine witchcraft as this big dramatic transformation. Like one day you light a candle, you buy a specific crystal, and you download a moon phase app, and suddenly you have become this fully realized magical creature standing barefoot in the forest while the ravens circle overhead like you are in the final scene of a epic fantasy movie. And wouldn't that be nice? Because for a lot of us, it is much quieter than that. It is also much messier than that. Uh, Sometimes witchcraft starts because something inside of us is starving. And I think that's part of my story. Okay. And it happens when you finally realize that you cannot survive by cutting pieces off of yourself anymore. Yeah. When you give and give and give, and then you have nothing for you, that kind of thing. And a while back, I did an episode called "The Witch Who Grew Up in the Woods," and that particular episode really was about where this path began for me. It was, focused on the atmosphere of it, the memories I had, that little girl version of me that was wandering through the yard and the woods, making potions out of flowers and leaves and pond and creek water. And, because somehow that felt very natural to me, even before I had words for what witchcraft was or that it was even a thing, right? Because the country, the woods was the first place I remember feeling safe. Not at school, not at home, not around other people, but the woods. I could, honest to God, yeah, honest to the goddess. I know those southern little, they still slip out, and I'm like, why do I say that? But anyway, honestly, I could disappear in the woods for just hours, just wandering around and looking at things and thinking and listening and collecting little things and just watching the wind move through the trees like the earth itself was breathing. And I've talked about this before because even the cemetery where my grandmother is buried, it felt very peaceful to me in a way that the living world sometimes didn't. You know what I mean? That's where I found my happy place. And looking back now, 30 some odd years later, I think that the child version of me was already searching for something sacred long before I ever could possibly understand what that meant. Because when you grow up in chaos or in instability or even just environments where you learn to stay quiet and small just to survive, you start to disconnect from yourself. You stop trusting your own instincts. You stop listening to your own feelings because you have to become whatever version of yourself keeps the peace around you. That's that version that keeps others happy and keeps you safe. And that's awful. It is just absolutely awful because after a while, you don't even know where the real you went to. I woke up one day just in the recently and realized I don't even know who I am anymore because I had people pleased so much that I forgot about myself. Yeah. And I really think that witchcraft initially became important to me because it was one of the first things that told me to listen to myself again and that that was okay. You know what I mean? To it wasn't about respecting some kind of authority or meeting some kind of expectation. And it wasn't what everyone else thought I should be because we all know that there's expectations growing up of what you're supposed to grow up and do and so forth. And that's what the world and society sees and is that you're supposed to do. But by listening to yourself, listening to myself, I realized I didn't have to worry about those things anymore, you know? Because when you've spent and it's very scary. It is very scary because when you've spent years learning not to trust your own voice, it's scary when you first start listening again, right? Yeah. And people talk a lot about your personal power, especially in witchcraft spaces. Okay. About reclaiming that and owning your personal power. Yeah. And I think sometimes that the deepest kind of power is simply learning that your feelings are real and that they matter, that your intuition matters, and that you are allowed to have boundaries, that you do not have to make yourself smaller just because somebody else is uncomfortable with who you are. You don't. Honey, it's your life. You live it the way you want to live it. And don't let nobody tell you any different. All right, don't be going around murdering people or anything like that. That's a bad plan. But you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Anyway, focus. I should focus. So I think when you realize that you don't have to adjust yourself for everyone else, that's what witchcraft gave me. Okay? It gave me the permission to listen to myself and to be who I truly was. And that is why my craft is more than just an aesthetic for me. Now, don't get me wrong, I do love all the aesthetics. I do. I love the old apothecary vibes and the candlelight and the herbs and all the spooky little goblin witch things. I love it. I don't even talk about how much crap I have around me that makes me feel good. Okay? But that's just the aesthetics. The craft itself when I first started in the craft, that became my survival. Yeah. It became a way to stay emotionally alive because when I started the craft, I was in a very, very bad situation and bad mental space in the 1990s, the late 1990s, not the early 90s. Well, no, I was in a different kind of bad space then, but that's not the point. I should really go take my meds. But anyway, okay. So witchcraft became a way for me to stay emotionally alive. Yes, because life, especially when it's rough and chaotic and so forth, it has a way of hardening people. I know life has done a lot to me through that because when you go through things like trauma, or you spend years carrying things quietly without those outlets, or when you work in environments where you are constantly pouring into others but allowing yourself to run on empty. Yeah. All of those things harden you as a person. And for me, somewhere in the midst of all of those things, witchcraft became this strange little act of resistance. Yeah. Lighting a candle became, I still deserve peace. Or making my tea with intention became, my body does deserve care. Smoke cleansing, and I love it. My wife hates it, but I love to smoke cleanse because that is me saying I am allowed to protect my space. Yeah, that's a big one for me. Pulling tarot cards. I love to pull my tarot cards, and being able to do that is saying I'm willing to sit honestly with myself because those tarot cards, they are not gonna sugarcoat nothing. They are gonna give it to you straight, and sometimes it is like a good kick in the ass. Mhm. Even even this podcast, honestly, this podcast has become a very important part of my healing. It really has. I started this just on a whim, thinking nobody's ever gonna listen to it, and I mean, it's not ginormous, but I'm totally okay with that because I know the people that are listening, it matters to them, right? So this podcast has become a very important part of my healing. Yeah. And because for so much of my life, I stayed quiet about different parts of myself, I learned how to adapt and how to blend in and how to survive environments where not everyone understood me. Yeah, because I live in the South. I am a female married to another female who practices witchcraft in the Bible Belt. I had a lot working against me just with that part. Yeah. And then one day I started this podcast and it was kind of like tossing a message in a bottle out into the ocean. It was just thoughts and just me, reading from basically a textbook of, hey, here's what the book says to, officially, create your circle and so forth. They were just ramblings and just my own voice out in the void. And somehow all of you have found it. And people now listen and they understand and it means something to people. I get comments about how a particular episode meant something and made someone feel seen. And that still feels very surreal to me, but absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. It brings me so much joy because I think a lot of us are walking around carrying this hidden version of ourselves, whether it be a softer or stranger or wounded or magical or angry or in the healing process version. All of these versions that we bury because the world told us it was too much. And that's bullshit. Yeah. Because witchcraft, at least for me, became the place where I could stop apologizing for existing. Yeah. You know, not perfectly, not all at once. And there are days I still struggle because I am human. There are days that I still doubt myself. There are also days where grief and anger and exhaustion sit very heavy on my chest. But now I have things like rituals and I have my intentions that I set, and I have spaces like this room that belong to me, just to me. This is my little chaotic oasis because my wife loves me so much. She said, "Here's you a room. You do whatever you want." And I have. It is my altar room. And because of that, I have my own voice. I found my voice again. And I think that's why this path matters to me so much after all these years, because I've been working the craft since the 1990s. I don't know about y'all, but that's been a minute. Yeah. And it wasn't because I thought I could control the universe. And it's not because I think I'm some untouchable mystic being floating around above reality. Because really, I'm not on those kinds of drugs and meds and stuff. And honestly, most days I am just a exhausted swamp witch drinking my caffeine and trying to emotionally process life in front of a fan because menopause is a huge thing while my house smells vaguely like incense and well probably a little sage. But beneath the humor and the candles and the herbs and the several jars of moon water, there is something deeply real here. Witchcraft gave me a language for survival, for healing, and for grief, for becoming, for accepting my intuition. It gave me a way to gather the broken pieces of myself and slowly stitch them back together with intention and purpose. And maybe that's the version of reclaiming power that people don't talk about enough. Because a lot of times reclaiming your power, it doesn't look loud. It's not dramatic. Sometimes it looks like finally resting or finally speaking or finally setting boundaries. Finally admitting that you deserve better. Finally trusting yourself. Finally allowing yourself to just exist fully instead of surviving in fragments. Yeah. So, no, I did not become a witch because I wanted power. I became a witch because somewhere along the way I lost pieces of myself. And this path helped me find them again. And I hope it helps you too. Thank you for sitting with me with this one tonight. It was kind of deep for me, I guess. And wherever you are on your path, or whether you're rebuilding yourself, or rediscovering yourself, or even grieving parts of yourself, or meeting yourself, really meeting yourself for the first time, I hope that you remember this. You are allowed to be someone that your younger self would have felt safe with. And honestly, that might be the best and realest magic after all. Until next time, my dears, stay safe, stay strange, and keep listening to the parts of yourself that still whisper in the dark. Bye.